Ladies and gentlemen, here I am doing my third movie review slash commentary, and I'm now finally doing my review on the movie I've been promising to doing, which is Halloween 2, which is the sequel to the 1978 original John Carpenter's Halloween. And here I'm gonna be spending the rest of the movie talking about my opinions on the movie, some trivia notes about it, and why I believe this is my most favorite Halloween sequel out of all the sequels besides Halloween H2O. And here I begin the movie now. Here, the Universal logo here, it's definitely explained that this is now a big studio film. This is the only Halloween movie Universal has ever distributed, by the way. I love the choice of using the song Mr. Sandman by the Quartets for the movie. I also love how this movie begins with a recap of where the first film ended, something the Rocky sequels had also used. To me, a sequel set immediately after its predecessor is a rare thing in the horror movie genre, because they usually set the horror movie sequel a few years later and sometimes focus on a new set of characters who have no relation to any of the characters in the original. But this movie instead decides to set it on the same night as in the first film. It sets like 10 seconds after the first ending of the first film, which is why I think this movie is special to me because of that. It's a very good recap. And here we have Jamie Lee Curtis back as Laurie. And her hair, because her hair was short in the early 80s, she decided to take on a new look on her hair by having it short. So now she's wearing a wig, which many people argued over and have complaints about, because it's very different from the hair she had in the first movie. But this sequel was made 3 years later, and the scene the scene where Laurie unmasks Michael after struggling with him. In the first movie, we get to see his face. That was Tony Moran who was playing Michael unmasked. But in this movie, they don't show his face and quickly cut away to Loomis pointing his gun. I don't think the filmmakers explained why they did that. One belief is so that they don't have to pay that actor any money because they showed his face through archive footage. Here you can clearly see that Michael is going up on a ramp so as to fall off the balcony. Also, the second floor balcony Michael falls off is strikingly different from the one in the first movie, which is possibly on one of the sides of the house. I guess they changed it so they can have Loomis find that Michael left a bloody body-sized dent on the lawn, and so that he can run into the grumpy neighbor. Or no. In the first movie, Loomis looked all calm and fine and just finesse, serene, trying to explain things patiently. But in this movie, he's all panicky and even sometimes raising his voice, and is even willing to shoot anyone who looks exactly like Michael. But that's what happens when you have a different director directing you in the wrong way. Here it makes us think now that Michael may be more than human. Loomis believes that Michael isn't human have come true. He can take 6 shots to the chest and still be able to walk away. This part here where Loomis says, "You don't know what this is," and then he runs and the music begins. Seems a bit cheesy, but it's cool when you start the sequel that way. It's cool, it would make me cheer in the theater. Once again, Mustafa Akkad overlooking the production of Halloween 2. I wonder how much involvement Dino De Laurentiis had in this movie. Probably none. The equal top billing cards is a very obvious reference to the same kind of starring card in that one movie, Towering Inferno, where Steve McQueen and Paul Newman had equal top billing. I love how the movie's opening title sequence replicates the first film's opening sequence. But it looks like the original Pumpkinhead had went through a big Botox and facelift. Get it? The music score for this movie was done by John Carpenter in association with Alan Howarth. Carpenter also doing the score for the first movie. But in this movie, the score sounds like a 1980s retro of the original soundtrack. You know, Carpenter wanting to do something a bit different. Because you can't repeat the same thing when it comes to sequels. I think I know that name, Gloria Gifford. I need to look it up after this commentary. And, yeah. Mark Goldblatt and Skip Skolnick doing the editing of the movie. Don't know them, but sometimes their editing in this movie is a bit sloppy. Here, this time, the Pumpkinhead splits open and they reveal a skull inside it. That would have scared the crap out of me if I did see a skull in a real-life Pumpkinhead. And Lance Guest is in this movie. He plays one of the paramedics, Jimmy Lloyd. It's cool. He starred in The Last Fighter. Go check out that movie. I will too, but he's also in Jaws: The Revenge, and we don't see much of him later in these times. Don't know why. And Dean Cundey returned as the director of photography, and I think it's cool that he came back to replicate the cinematography. And hopefully we'll get to more of them later. And to get it out of the way, John Carpenter did not direct this movie, but instead it was Rick Rosendahl. Here's why. Carpenter didn't want to direct a sequel because, and I quote, "I had made that film once and I really didn't want to do it again." And he's right. Because the sequel does basically rehash the first film's plot, which is Michael stalking Laurie and killing a bunch of random people in the process. As you can see coming up Sheriff Brackett's car, the word sheriff tagged on the side is completely different from what it looked like in the first movie. Change of times when it comes to 3 years. And so close. And Loomis panics. "I shot him in the heart." "This man, he's not human." You said that in the first movie, but he said it more calmly. On returning to Carpenter and not directing the movie, after he turned down the job, he originally approached Tommy Lee Wallace, who was the art director and co-editor for the original movie, to direct the sequel. However, Wallace turned it down because he wasn't interested in directing a sequel that rehashed the first film. He wanted to try a completely different plot for the sequel, like maybe show Laurie in college and once again being stalked by Michael. They didn't use that idea, but they did use the idea of Laurie in a private school as the basis for Halloween H2O, where she ends up becoming the principal for a private school in California. On a side note, Wallace did go on to direct Halloween 3's Season of the Witch, which is a good movie when you watch it a couple more times. and which does not feature villain Michael Myers. I love how Rosendahl replicated the POV shot from the first movie. Accordingly, Rosendahl attempted to, as you see here, you can now see Michael in the light, which gives away the creepiness that made him in the first movie more scarier, which seen him in the dark. But yeah, I love this how Mrs. Elrod sees the blood and she just screams. And here, it's a bit ridiculous how Michael breaks into this one neighbor's house, her name is Alice, and kills her, but the reason why is so that he would heal from his gunshot injuries. And, you know, that's why. Alice here, she may seem helpful here at first, but then she goes back to her house and, you know, just ignores the screaming, no longer concerned what might have happened out there. I love how, in the first movie, you focus on the person on the phone and you can see Michael in the background outside. But here, you're in Michael's point of view, looking at the person inside the house on the phone, which is cool. Alice is a dick to her neighbors. So to say, a major complaint about this movie is that it's much more bloody, more graphic than in the first movie. Here's what happened and why it became that. Is that Rosendahl attempted to recreate the elements and themes of the original film and reproduce and under Rosendahl's direction, he did direct it to be more like the same tone of the original movie, with no graphic scenes, no sex scenes, no graphic gore, blood splurting out. And that's how it turned out. But during editing, Carpenter, so as you can see, the decision to include more gore and nudity was not made by Rosendahl, but Carpenter, accordingly to Rosendahl. Carpenter, he was afraid that since this movie was going to be in competition against other horror movies like Friday the 13th, which were more like slasher, or Friday the 13th Part 2, which were more like slasher movies. Carpenter was afraid that this movie would bomb because of that, so he came in and directed a few sequences to clean up some of Rosendahl's work, and out of fear that it would be too tame by the slasher audience. So he refilmed several death scenes with more gore, and including the scene where Alice gets killed. And, yep, so it was Carpenter who did the idea of making it into a slasher movie. And Rosendahl was not pleased with Carpenter's changes. He reportedly complained that Carpenter ruined my carefully paced film. And I guess Rosendahl will never forgave Carpenter for it after that, based on how he directed Halloween Resurrection, which I'll never talk about again. And regardless, with many of the graphic scenes contain elements not seen before in film. Critic Roger Ebert claims, "This movie has the first close-up I can remember of a hypodermic needle being inserted into an eyeball." And The film is often categorized as a splatter film rather than a slasher film due to the elevated level of gore. Film critic John McCarthy writes of splatter films. They aim not to scare their audience necessarily, nor to drive them to the edge of their seats in suspense, but to mortify them with scenes of explicit gore. In splatter movies, mutilation is indeed the message. Here, this poor kid with the razor blade in the mouth, which is a theme that happened in real life. I feel bad for that kid. When my nephew goes out trick-or-treating, I'm gonna check all the big candy bars and make sure there are no razor blades or sharp objects in them. Here we are at the Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, and it looks empty as shit inside. Little to no patients, probably. And the hospital staff here are terrible at their jobs. They are lazy and don't respond well to emergencies, and it's just, that ridiculous, And they, including the lead doctor, Dr. Mixter, when he comes in, it's claimed that he was drunk, so you can see it there, and yet he does an operation. Operating while intoxicating. Worst doctor ever. But, it is noted that the plot of the sequel was rather simple. The plot of Halloween 2 absolutely depends, of course, on our friend called the idiot plot, which requires that everyone in the movie behave at all times like an idiot. That's necessary because if anyone were to use common sense, the problem would be solved and the movie would be over. And so is that. Because of that, the characters in this movie were described as shallow and like cardboard. But the producer and co-writer Deborah Hill rebuffed such critiques by arguing that in a thriller film, what a character says is often irrelevant, especially in those sequences where the objective is to build up suspense. And Mrs. Owls. She is a bit mean, but, head nurses. And this part here where Laurie says, "Don't put me to sleep, movie unintentionally inspires A Nightmare on Elm Street." And this is where Laurie goes into deep sleep. Jamie Lee Curtis gets top billing in this movie, but her screen time is only over 20 minutes. And she barely does anything in this movie except run and scream. I love this whole shot where we're in the windshield and we see Sheriff Brackett and Dr. Loomis arguing. It's a nice one shot. I wish we have more of these in movies today, instead of the MTV style shaking and quick cuts and confusion. I'd love to see more horror movies that are set in one night and focus on the police trying to catch a killer in a town, radioing in on each other. I might come up with that one day. And that's funny. Will you put that thing away? I told you this isn't a man. And this part where this guy here looks like Michael, but you can tell it's not Michael because of the difference of his clothes. It's a button shirt and he's wearing orange gloves and he's carrying a trick-or-treat bag. And his hair is all blonde and sticking up. And this part, this kid is screwed. When I first saw this part where he gets run over by the cop car and hit by the van and explodes, that shocked me because I thought that was like an 8-year-old kid, but it wasn't. But So that explodes for some reason. Because physics. Because reasons. The cop who drove the car into the van, that's stunt coordinator Dick Warlock, who also plays Michael in this movie. And it's said that to get the role of Michael, Dick Warlock revealed that as he passed by a room, he saw the Michael Myers mask on a table. He put the mask on and walked into Rick Rosenthal's office and stood there. After Rosenthal continuously asked him who he was and he didn't reply, he took off the mask and asked if he could play Michael Myers. And that's how he got the job. But I wish it was Nick Castle who played Michael in the original movie. I wish that was Nick Castle back. Why didn't he come back for this one? We'll never know. You'd often think that this place would be crowded, but it isn't. But I'll give you a little hint as to why, based on script changes. The script was written by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, as we all know, but it's been revealed that the original script, in the original script, they had considered setting the sequel a few years after Halloween 1, and they planned to have Michael track Laurie Strode to her new home in a high-rise apartment building. And that would have been very different. But during script meetings, they later changed it to the Haddonfield Hospital. But you can obviously realize why the hospital is empty, because they were going to go for an apartment building. But I think that would have been cool to see what Halloween 2 would have been like if it was set in an apartment building. We'll never know. Here's where Jimmy hits on Laurie. How about a Coke? And as always, Miss South's micromanaging Laurie's room. This guy coming up right next to the woman outside the Wallace house. That guy in there with the blue head cap. That's comedian Dana Carvey, who would later go on to star in that disastrous comedy, The Master of Disguise. As you can see here on the gurney is Annie Brackett, Sheriff Brackett's daughter, who is dead from her throat being slit by Michael. That's Nancy Loomis, who was married to Tommy Lee Wallace in the 80s. That would be good for you all to know. And this is the last time we see Sheriff Brackett in this movie. Just for you to know. And he blames Loomis for letting Michael out of the mental institution. But it wasn't really Loomis's fault. Michael escaped his way. And Loomis had no involvement in that escape. And here, this police officer here is Gary Hunt, played by Hunter Von Leer, who I'll find out about after this stuff. And Loomis once again tries his motivational speech on Hunt. Michael isn't human. I shot him and he got up and walked away. Saying all this in front of the media. I always thought it would be cool, in my idea, I thought it would be cool that for the second half, Sheriff Brackett would become a sort of villain where he leads a angry mob to find Michael in a murderous way for revenge for Annie's dead murder. I always thought that would be a cool idea. Maybe in one of the scripts are right. And here's where we meet one of the other nurses about to head to work, Karen Bailey, played by Pamela Susan Shoop. I love her convertible car. Reminds me of Back to the Future, in some odd way. And where Karen says she'll be late for work and Mrs. South is gonna kill her for being late. I love this part coming up. It's if you'll miss a moment, but when the guy when the guy with the radio bumps into Michael, the radio says Laurie's been taken across county to Hatfield Memorial Clinic, and I think that's how Michael found out where Laurie was. But it's a good jump scare when he pops up that way, and the music does that. And this is cool how Michael is wearing a mask and overalls, and it's Halloween night where everyone is dressed in costume, so he's mistaken for another Halloween costume guy. And this is funny how these two cop cars pass by with their sirens and they don't notice Michael. You'd think Loomis would describe what Michael was wearing since he saw him wear a white mask and overalls. And of course here are Michael heading towards the hospital, which would take him in real life probably at least an hour or two to get there when he's walking that way. But instead it takes him 5 to 10 minutes flat to get there. And this is funny. Nurse Karen, she's parking in a visitor parking spot. She deserves to die for that. And the reflection in the rearview mirror of Michael. As you can see, the mask is dirty. That's not a completely different mask. The mask Michael wears here in this movie is the exact same mask worn in the original movie, or a painted and modified Captain Kirk mask. It looks different in here because the paint had faded due to a few reasons. First, because Nick Castle, the original Michael, kept it in his back pocket during shoots. Also, Deborah Hill kept the mask under her bed for several years until the filming of Halloween 2, causing it to collect dust and yellow because Hill was a heavy smoker. Also, the mask appears wider because Dick Warlock is shorter and stockier than Nick Castle, so the masks fit his head differently. As the producers thought it would be the final sequel in the series, they let Warlock keep the mask, scalpel, boots, jumpsuits, and knife used in filming. Big mistake for Halloween 4, because in Halloween 4 they had to go with a different mask. And security guard Mr. Garrett isn't looking at the monitors and seeing Michael sneaking into the hospital. Worst. Top flight security guard at its worst. Bud here, I don't know what he's smoking. I think he's smoking weed, based on what his eyes look like and how he's doing it. Usually for cigarettes you go like this, but with the pinch thing and bowl, I think he's smoking weed. And I love that joke. Every other word you say is either hell or shit or damn. I'm sorry. I guess I just fuck up all the time. The ward. And as you can hear through the television, they're still showing a horror movie marathon. Chiller. I think the marathon guy said back to dementia. I'll check and see if there is a movie called Dementia, or despite knowing that there is a movie called Dementia 13. Where did Bud get that idea that, when it comes to nurses, it's a totally different story, how you can fall in love with them, but with patience, it never works out. What does he think? He's not a love doctor. And you can notice here, in the ward part of the hospital, there's babies in the ward after their birth and all that. They're sleeping in those little tables with in front of a big window. That's cute. I hope they survive the end. I want to know what happened to the babies after this movie. And this is funny. Michael is so close to the door, about to exit, and Miss South passes by. I'm surprised she didn't notice him there. "15 minutes late for work." And you can clearly see in the blurry background Michael by his mask, and I love how he just walks by, right behind them there. In the television version, which is tame and lame, the scene here is extended by the beginning, where Jimmy finally gives Laurie the coke. And here, where Laurie finds out that her attacker was Michael Myers. Why me? You'll find out why. Which basically ruins the scare factor of the original movie as to why Michael was stalking Laurie. And I love that little continuity thing here, which is keeping track. In the first movie, Michael cut her arm here with the knife. Now they have it all bandaged up. And I love the Halloween decorations in the hospital. Happy Halloween! And now the phones are not working. Probably because Michael cut the power for the telephones. And this one little quick shot where you can see he took the scalpel. That used to freak me out when I first saw that as a kid, the scalpel. I don't know how, because I didn't know scalpels, realizing that they were dangerously sharp. perfect weapon for him. In a way, this is the last time we see of Miss Sals, so goodbye, Mrs. Sals. We'll see you dead later in the movie. That part where when Miss Sals enters and finds Jimmy once again with Laurie, she says, "Time's up, Jimmy." There was in the TV cut, when he's about to head towards Laurie's room, he passes by Miss Sals and she says, 2 minutes, that's it. So, time's up, or his 2 minutes are up. And it seems like some of the power lines, I don't know, are cut off on the telephone pole. But this is a suspenseful scene when you think about it, that he's eventually heading towards his doom. And it's suspense-filled, especially without the music. And coming up here, the black cat. Maybe it's a sign of his death to come. And I think that's a weak jump scare with the black cat jumping out. I'm gonna, due to some boring bits that I don't know what to say about, I'm gonna skip to the 37 minute, 40 minute mark, right about now. This part where he's in the storage room and looks at the tool rack, I don't know, but I think it's supposed to tell us that the hammer is now missing. Where's the hammer? We'll see. We'll find out soon enough. I think someone just broke into the hardware store. And to send someone send someone to the sheriff's department right away. And of course, the walkie-talkies, the reception is shitty. Of course. In the horror movies, communication device doesn't work. But this was before cell phones. And this whole bit where he tries to play hero. It's funny how, you know, the doors he's about to open, they're locked with the padlocks, even though the padlocks are unlocked, but what makes him think that they're inside those little rooms when the door is locked? How are they able to do that from outside, from inside? And of course it's just some boxes and junk falling out. In the TV cut, after this, right before he checks the second room, it cuts to Michael going down the stairs from the hospital to the hardware place down there to kill Mr. Garrett. It's best to watch it this way instead of in the TV version, because that bit just gives it. Fades away the suspense. And here Michael jumps up here and kills him with the hammer to the head, claw hammer to the head. Believe it or not, 1989 was a year when, in horror movies, when a police officer gets killed with a hammer to the head. And of course, this nurse just straight up leaves to get back on the floor. This dentist here in the morgue, that's his name is Graham. That's Jeffrey Kramer, who was in Jaws 1 and 2 as he was in Jaws 1 and 2 as Deputy Lenny Hendricks, the Chief Brody's trusted deputy. He was cool in those movies. And this is funny here at the Myers house. There's the townsfolk of Haddonfield doing a mad mob thing, throwing rocks at the house, which is stupid because it's late at night, possibly 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're up, going like, just doing this. This is throwing the rocks at the house. Over a manhunt. One of their number was butchered. This is awake. Loomis has the most cultless way of viewing humanity. It's so funny. And I love how Hunt pushes this one kid when he yells, "Knock it off!" Once again, a nice one shot. Done very well. Up, the Hunt giving Loomis the yellow lighter. Remember that lighter? We'll be seeing that lighter again. And here's where Loomis once again repeats his fears and beliefs about Michael and his nature. There was a force inside him biding its time. Jeez, I hate to know what it must have been like to being Michael, spending 15 years in a sanitarium, not talking or moving or anything. It's like the evil was shut down for 15 years and then wakes up 15 years later. And now, mentioning Bennett Tramer. And it turns out that kid who looked like Michael getting run over and then burnt. Wait, Ben Tramer? The Ben Tramer? I feel bad for Ben Tramer because, he ends up getting killed and has a crush on Lori. I wonder how badly disappointed, what Lori's reaction is when she finds out that Ben was killed. And it always struck me as odd that Ben was wearing the exact same thing Michael was wearing. Especially on the same night Michael was wearing it. And of course, another jump scare where Nurse Karen looks like she's getting attacked by Michael on the hospital bed, but it's just Bud acting like a teenager. Bud and Karen would fit in very well in the Friday the 13th franchise. With those little scissors? I don't know. Once again, I'll be skipping to the 47-minute, 10-second mark. And that's harsh for this Laurie's mother here in this dream saying, "I'm not your mother." Well, that's a little harsh. And this dream sequence is a bit... seeing young Laurie meeting young Michael in the sanitarium doesn't actually make sense, really. It's supposed to drop hints on the big revelation that Laurie is actually Michael's sister. Yep, which basically ruins the mystery of the first movie. Which we'll get to about later when that revelation comes. And here's where the movie goes into Friday the 13th territory. With the hot tub thing. Except I think in this one, they never finished the sex. They're just almost halfway through. That water in there must be awfully hot, especially when it gets to scalding. And of course this movie has nudity, which is very little in the original, but of course Carpenter trying to keep this movie from being tame. I love this bit how Bud goes like, "It's just me." It was you. Wait, 100 degrees? Jeez, hot. It's cold out there. Of course. Reminds me of in the Friday the 13th reboot where that guy goes like, "I'm not gonna go out there with a boner." But I do love this one shot where we see in the background, blurry background, Bud getting killed off and Michael, you know, pretending to be the boyfriend thing for Karen. Very quick and effective death for Bud. And this part here where Michael gets closer, it looks like he's stepping up on something to be taller. Why? It's because Dick Warlock is actually shorter than Nick Castle. So It's possibly because he's standing on a small stool. And it repeats its own thing where the girl thinks the person up to her is her boyfriend when it's really Michael about to kill her. I thought that was cool. And I love this, how he drowns her and also burns her to death in the scalding hot water. And geez, that must really hurt his right hand as well. But later on it's all fine, like normal. Jeez. I'll be putting my hand in ice after that. And this part coming up here where Loomis and the police investigate the elementary school that was broken in. It's honestly a bit stupid for Michael to break into an elementary school, leave a bloody handprint, stab his knife into a picture that says sister on it, and write Sam Hain on the blackboard. Why would he waste his time on that? Also, finally, Michael learns a new word. Learns his first word, Sam Hain. Or as other people would call it, Samhan. And I think Loomis is wrong about that one bit where Sam Hain means the Lord of the Dead. I don't think so. I love how this police officer has a flashlight in a well-lit place. And that's Nancy Stevens coming back as Marion Chambers, who was driving with Loomis in the station wagon up to Smith Grove, and she ends up getting attacked by Michael, who is on the roof. So here she is returning to bring Loomis back to Smith Grove. But the governor can. So as to make the stakes higher in this movie. It makes me laugh to see the janitor in the background cleaning up the floor with that retro machine thing. Marion here mentions Dr. Kelter. It would have been a lot more better and more comfortable for me if she said Dr. Wynn. Because we already know that doctor in the first movie, who will end up becoming the main villain for the bullshit sequel, Halloween 6: The Curse of Michael Myers. It's funny, you know, how Michael is able to wander around this hospital without being noticed once. And this hospital is dim-lighted now. I don't think that can ever happen. I've never seen a hospital that dim-lighted in my life now, but I think they would keep the lights on fully, but to make the suspense, the hospital has to go into horror movie territory. And Laurie having a reaction to her medication. Because reasons. And Nurse Janet here finding Dr. Mixter dead and ends up being killed by Michael. Here we see Dr. Mixter dead again. What a waste of water. And I find this aquarium to be really awesome. And it well lits the dark room when you think about it. And I love that Dr. Mixter, the head doctor of this place. Even though, you know, head doctors are supposed to be around the hospital 24/7, but he's in his checkered pajamas. But how he died here by a syringe in his eye. Ugh! Hurts my eye. Ouch! But geez, these people take a completely ridiculous ways to use drugs. And here where Michael's mask lights up behind her. Another obvious reference to in the original Halloween when Michael is about to attack Laurie. And that's another one of Carpenter's reshoots of the syringe going into Janet. The ladies' lounge and hopes to find Miss Sal's there. Wonder how funny that would have been if he ran into the ladies' lounge and found Miss Sal's in a towel. What you doing, boy? And here, Nurse Jill about to head out to help out another patient and on the other side of the hall. I didn't even know there was another patient here in this seemingly empty hospital. And it seems pretty obvious that Michael knows exactly where Laurie is, so he could have done this a lot earlier. But nope. Instead goes all Friday the 13th horror slasher movie thing. I love the scalpel. It looks very scary for him when he uses it, and I love how he stabs the what we believe is Laurie in that bed, but it isn't. It's just pillows. But I love that. It looks like the part where he's stabbing it looks like it's like he's probably supposed to be stabbing her liver. Because the liver is our most important part in our anatomy. That goes, we die. But it looks like he was supposed to be stabbing her in that part. And Laurie now. Still under the drugs, like the anesthetic, is walking to escape from Michael now. And hide. But to say, what I heard is that because they had never intended to do Halloween 2 as a sequel, Carpenter did not want to write the sequel. He wanted no involvement in it. But since he realized that they were going to do the sequel with him or without him, he decided to do it anyway. And despite writing multiple drafts, I think I heard at one point that he wrote the script in one night with a 6-pack of beer. And so, and the plot twist of Laurie being Michael's sister is basically that was just him under the influence of his 6-pack trying to come up with a interesting twist for the sequel. Thanks, John. Thanks, John Carpenter. You made a very good twist there. That is either awesome or ludicrous. This part there where she looks down the halls from the door did frighten me when I was a kid, assuming that he might come up out of one of those halls and attack her there. But no. And she once again goes back to sleep until she's needed for convenient reasons. This part here where Loomis and Marion is going into the marshal's car to go back to Smith's Grove. This is the last time we see Hunt, and I'd love to see more of him. Shame. But we do see him at the end, but I'd love to see more of his character in this movie. Skipping now to the 1 hour and 3 minute and 40 mark. Very good suspense moment where you look at the monitor and see Michael just going up through the halls and hiding in the one room, and you see also see Nurse Jill going to that same door. You think he's gonna kill her there. It's a very suspenseful moment, but the moment where Jimmy pops up behind her and grabs her or scares her, that's a bit ridiculous. You could have said, and how he just walks or runs up to her quietly is ridiculous. Doing that, hey. Could have said hey earlier or something. But you can see Michael with with Jimmy and Jill in the foreground. You can see in the background Michael's shadow, which is cool. Barely noticed the shadow, the silhouette. And this whole bit here, where Jimmy finds Miss Al's dead, such a cool, interesting way for her to die. I'm thinking maybe Michael strangled Miss Al's with the stethoscope stuff around her neck and hooked up the little pipe thing to her wrist and have the blood drip out. But it is scary the way it's lit. She died from blood loss. And this is actually pretty ridiculous when he trips and hits his head on the floor, knocking him out. Tries to be. We expected him to be the hero, and yet this happens to him. And here where Nurse Jill attempts to start her car, and it doesn't, and she finds all the tires on all the cars slashed, and what looks like the gas tanks drained, but because of what looks like the spill right beside the slashed tire. Yep, that's gas. But I love that instead of running, which I would have done, run out and run for the police station, the sheriff's department, she instead decides to go back into the hospital. Just so that she could be killed off. And here Lori waking up because convenience. And I love how she turns to see Jill, and then she continues to walk away. Yeah, she's gonna die. I'm just gonna walk away. But wait, I'm gonna watch her get killed first. Jill passes by Michael here and yet doesn't notice him right there. Jeez. I would have noticed this black thing on this, or against this orange wall. And this is a cool way for Nurse Jill to die, getting stabbed right in the back and lifted up, and her shoes falling off. And thus begins the chase, repeated from the first movie. And how Laurie used the gurney to block him. But I would do it too. To be honest, I would do the same thing. And this bit here at the 1 hour and 10-minute mark, where she finds Mr. Garrett hanging from a light, dead. Why would Michael waste his time hanging that security guard? Maybe for a decoration type thing, or, you know, I don't know. And he walks terribly slow in this one. I'd like to believe that the reason why he's walking slower than he did in the first movie is because after being stabbed and shot 6 times, it incapacitated him and caused him... the wounds caused him to slow down a bit. Because that's what can happen, it can slow you down. Being wounded can slow you down a bit. And here Michael attempting to cut Laurie as she's climbing through the window doesn't slash her a bit, you know, could have, like, but no, misses when she's that close, like he did in the first movie with the couch. Easiest target to hit ever, still misses. And this is just a bit stupid how she has to go around this big fence thing to go on the other side and reach the elevator, which takes... Elevator takes its sweet-ass time stopping for her to her level. Also, Michael takes a sweet time coming up to her. And especially at the last minute. It's a miracle. And when the door closes on Michael's hand, normally if that happened, the door would open up, open back up, but instead it keeps closing after he lets go. And this is what I think is a smart move, out on the parking lot, hide in one of the cars. Which is what I probably would have done too. Especially when you have a broken leg. And it's pretty convenient that the car she hides in is actually Jimmy's. Plot convenience is everywhere. And I love this bit how we're with Loomis in the back of the marshal's car.
Don't get sorry for me. Feel sorry for that little town back there. Years before they forget this.
It'd be years before they forget this. Actually 10, if you consider Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers as part of canon. And also the events of Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. And Loomis, once again, speech time, where he talks about the nature of Samhain, witches being burned alive. Okay, we get that Michael is driven by an ancient curse, or driven by an ancient evil involving Halloween. We don't need to know much, and we don't need to know why he's doing it based on Halloween 6. It's best to know that he is just pure and simple evil. That's good enough for me. And here's the revelation that changed everything and changed the mystery that kept us scared in the first movie.
That Strode girl, that's Michael Myers' sister.
What?
2 years before he was committed, 2 years after his parents died and she was adopted by the Strodes, they requested that the records be sealed in order to protect the family.
Jesus, don't you see what it's doing here in Haddonfield?
So that explains it. Some people believe that on Halloween 1963, in the beginning of the first movie, that Judith was 17. Actually, she's 16 years old, so... Yep, that's what I believe too, that she was 16 years old at that time. And I love that's how Loomis just does a warning shot and that makes the marshal turn around back to the hospital. Loomis is a bit trigger happy. And here where we see Jimmy a bit half-dazed, attempting to start the car and passes out. When his head hits the horn. He's basically, it seems stupid when he does that, but because it may seem like him honking the horn with his head, it's like he's attracting the killer closer to Laurie, but it isn't. It's really the horn is for if any like police hears it. That's what I like to believe. Also, based on this version of the movie, this is the last time we see of Jimmy. We don't know if he's died or unconscious. But in the TV cut, there's like an extended ending, which we'll get to later. But is he dead? Is he out cold? And lucky as shit timing as she gets out of the car, and Loomis and the marshal car parks right at the front entrance, just as she's a couple 100 feet away. And of course she does the horror movie trope where she whimpers for help, and waits until the last second to scream for help, which they don't hear. I would have screamed the moment I saw them. Even Scream 1 did, even Scream did it, the first movie with Drew Barrymore, but it was done perfectly. And I love that how Loomis keeps threatening the marshal at gunpoint. And I'm wondering, what sort of various parts is Michael going? He just pops up right behind, almost a couple yards right behind Laurie. Where does he find these various places to pop out of nowhere? He must have those teleportation devices. And here's where it recreates another suspenseful scene from the first movie where Laurie screams, trying to open the door as Michael walks closer towards her, which is cool. And this marshal takes his sweet-ass time getting to the door in a way when he was supposed to be like a couple 70 feet away from it. But instead it's Loomis who opens the door. And this part where Michael walks through the door, busting the glass. That's more like Terminator style. Like a robot. In the Friday the 13th movies, Jason just busts it down like this. And here, Loomis once again shoots Michael. This time 5 times. So Loomis has fired 6 shots, and he's now out of bullets. And this guy just gets closer to Michael. We'd all want to stay away from the killer when he's supposedly dead. And this line, the marshal says,
"Now wait a minute. I'm the only one authorized to use that. Well,
"Dipshit, this has no time to argue over who has authorization over the radio." And I love this. Loomis says exactly what the audience is thinking.
get away from him. Stop breathing. No.
He stopped breathing, and Michael jumps up and kills him. That's cool. And you think if he was loaded, Loomis I would have definitely shot him, this time in the head. And they could easily get away from him with running. But as always, the killer, being dead slow, catches up to his victims. Somehow. And so, in a way, another reason why Michael walks slowly is because Dick Warlock is actually basing his walking on the last scene in the first movie when Michael gets up and attempts to attack Laurie one last time. He walks slowly. That's how he's basing it off of. Maybe he should have based it off more of Michael's walking throughout the movie, the way Nick Castle did it. I still prefer Nick Castle as the Michael Myers. And this room here that Loomis and Laurie hides in, which says major surgery, right next to it is the minor surgery, which is where Miss South's corpse is in. So, small world in this hospital. And Loomis giving her a gun. What makes him think she's a good shot? Well, I don't know. But I do love this, how Michael busts the door like bum bum and then finally breaks it down. I thought that was cool. Really awesome part for this movie. And Loomis, if it was me and as Michael was busting down the door, I would definitely point it like that and shoot him right in the head. He has this good chance, but blows it. You had your advantage, and you blew it. And Loomis goes down because I was stabbed by the scalpel. That would hurt if I was getting stabbed by a scalpel, even though I never was. This always makes me a bit embarrassed in a way when she says Michael and he stops and turns his head. But it helps, I guess, stretch the running time of this movie a bit longer. And this bit where Laurie shoots him in the eyes. Luckiest shots ever. But the bullet instead doesn't create exit wounds. It could have went up through his brain and out of his head, and that would have killed him instantly, but instead goes for blood tears. But I think it's cool, in my honest opinion. And this bit, I do love where Michael is just blind and now swinging the scalpel, but the sound that whoo, whoo, it's a bit funny. Now they're going for kung fu. Might as well add in the Batman TV show things that BAM! Or whoosh! And Michael is so dead close to them when he does that he could have slashed them like when he's like this close. And I find it funny how this hospital has ether, which is like a combustible gas. What sort of hospital would need flammable combustible gas like ether for an operation? Because explosive ending. But I do love the way how they just kill off Michael. It's really awesome. And I just love it. That lighter coming in. Lights it and boom. Awesome. And thank God that the hospital was a bit empty, because there would have been a lot of collateral damage. And I love this bit how Michael walks out of the fire, still on fire. If you can see in his right hand, you can still see he still has the scalpel. I think. But you can clearly tell he's wearing a flame retardant suit. It looks like he's wearing gloves, too. And finally, he drops to the floor, dead. In my honest opinion. But I love the shots where we see the mask in a close-up being burnt. I love that. And the body count that there is 10. It's 16 deaths. If you watch both Halloween 1 and 2 together, it's basically 16 up to 20 deaths when you think about it. And WWAR. Woo-war. And here's where Laurie is being put up into the ambulance to go to a hospital with a better staff. And that's the end of the story arc for Laurie Strode, Dr. Sam Loomis, and Michael Myers. And the series has gone off to be a successful line of Halloween-themed anthology films. In a slightly more perfect world. Yep, that's right. This movie was intended to be the last chapter of the Halloween series to revolve around Michael Myers and Haddonfield. But because of the lackluster reaction to Halloween 3, they decided to bring back Michael for Halloween 4. The return of Michael Myers. Wish the world was a lot more enthusiastic for Halloween 3 back then. So to say, in the alternate ending, when Laurie's in the ambulance, you can see the waking up next to her was Jimmy, bandaged up and alive, and they hold hands and say, "We did it, we made it," which I think would have been a cool, happy ending. But they instead decided to end it ambiguously. But I also do love the end where the final shot of Michael's mask being on fire and the Mr. Sandman song. Great way to end a good part 2. And here once again, Tony Moran credited as still credited in this movie as Michael Myers, age 23, even though his face is never seen in it. And production manager Jeffrey Chernoff, who would later go on to be the executive producer for the 2009 reboot of Star Trek and Star Trek Into Darkness. But anyway, the so to say, I do like the tagline more of the night he came home. Definitely a good way to describe how this movie's gonna be. But thank you for watching this movie review slash fan commentary on Halloween 2. Not the Rob Zombie version, but the old one. And I hope you enjoyed this review. And soon there will be more coming, and so thanks for watching. Bye bye.